Good morning, YouTube. How are we doing today? I'm feeling amazing. I just crushed a anterior day. Holy shit. Don't even know what day it is. Crushed an anterior day. Feeling great, feeling lovely. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Today, I want to talk about the brain and how it impacts muscle. Specifically, I want to talk about motor unit recruitment. Big old fancy word for just how the brain turns on muscles, how we move, contract, stuff like that. So, because this is going to come down to single limb exercises and single joint. And we're going to talk about some theory here. We're going to talk about how sometimes mechanisms don't mean jack shit because they don't actually lead to meaningful outcomes. I know, I'm an outcome cell. Oh God, Anyways, so what is motor unit recruitment? Well, essentially to move anything in your body, to move any of your muscles, your brain has to send an electrical signal. This is called central motor command. And now this signal goes from your brain, your motor cortex specifically, down your spinal cord, and it hits your muscle fibers. It hits a couple of them. So the motor neuron and the fibers that it's connected to, that it innervates, right, is called a motor unit. So one motor unit is one neuron controls multiple fibers. That is the motor unit. It's not a one-to-one thing. And whenever we're talking about motor unit recruitment, we always have to bring up Henneman's size principle. Now, in simple terms, right, this just says that the larger the muscle fiber is, the harder we have to try to turn it on. And this makes sense, right? Because if I just want to pick up a coffee cup, I don't need the bigger the fiber, obviously the more force it produces as well. So I don't want my big ass fibers, my motor units that control my highest producing fibers to be turning on and smack do a full contraction and throw my entire coffee cup into my face, all the coffee. So I want to use my smaller fibers that produce less force. Larger fibers produce more force, smaller ones less. That seems kind of obvious. But now let's talk about fiber types. So there's two types of fibers in humans. I'm not talking about animals. Every time I talk about this, everyone's like, but you missed a fiber type. Yeah, because it's not in humans. Why would I talk about it? So we have type 1. These are slow twitch. These ones are oxidative, which means they run on oxygen. Most. And then we have type 2. These are your fast twitch, right? These are they're more glycolytic. So this means they run more on glucose. And these ones, holy shit. Sorry, this guy's trying to kill me. These ones are bigger. These ones produce more force. So, and they obviously fatigue faster. That's the main difference, right? The other main difference is, so we have obviously size. Type 2 are a little bigger and they produce more force and they run on a different fuel essentially. And they have twice as much growth potential. So your type 1 fibers, your slow twitch, they don't have that much potential to grow comparatively. Your type 2 are the ones that have a lot more potential to grow. So these are the ones that we want to be activating. And these are the ones that are harder to activate. These are the ones, again, back to Henneman's size principle, right? They're bigger, so we need to try harder if we want to turn them on. And now this is why everyone recommends using heavy loads, because around that 80, once we get to about that 5 rep max zone, that 5 to 7 rep max, that is where we likely have max motor unit recruitment. We're likely recruiting all of our fibers. That's pretty much as hard as your brain can push. And we're likely recruiting all of the fibers, because the way the motor unit recruitment works is it recruits up the size principle. So we start with we don't need to use those heavy fibers. Oh, this is one thing that I forgot to mention is they fatigue faster. So why is this so? Those bigger fibers, right? They are going to fatigue faster. They are, or I guess they're more prone to fatigue is a better way to say it. And they recover slower, right? And this is just kind of by nature because we're not supposed to be using them all the time. They're not meant to be used all the time. We're not supposed to be going high effort for everything. And that is why fatigue exists. Fatigue exists so that we don't damage ourselves. But what does all this mean? Why am I talking about all this? Why should you care? Well, you should care because, again, those are the ones that have twice the growth potential. So those are the ones we want to train. And when we're talking about motor unit recruitment, you only have a certain amount of central motor command that you can send. Right? Your brain doesn't have unlimited electricity inside of it. And the theory behind motor unit recruitment is that it's very complex. our brain, this is where you get into neuromechanical matching of what actually decides, motor unit recruitment is a mechanical advantage. Yes, it is in respiratory cells. And this is just beyond the scope of this video. What I want to talk about is single joint and single limb exercises versus doing multi-joint and multi-limb exercises. So if I'm going to do let's say single leg extension versus a double leg, just a normal leg extension, is the single leg going to net me more hypertrophy? Well, we have something called the bilateral force deficit. And this is why people think that unilateral movements are better, because what the bilateral force deficit is when you do something single joint. So in our example of a single leg extension, you can do more than half of what you can do with the double leg version. So let's say, just for argument's sake, to keep the numbers easy, let's just say I do 200 pounds on double leg extension. I would be able to do likely somewhere around 100, at least 100 pounds on unilateral. More than likely, I will be able to do around 120 or more. Because of this, people say, well, there you go. You got more motor unit recruitment. They say that it's because we have more motor unit recruitment when we're doing the unilateral version, because, we're not splitting the central motor command. So that means that if I do everything unilateral, that I will get more gains. And that makes solid sense when you think about it. But every time that we compare single joint movements to multi-joints and single limb versions to unilateral to bilateral, we don't see a difference in outcomes. And the only difference in outcomes that we've seen in the literature is just strength specific. It's task specific. So the unilateral group, there's one that just came out, a paper that just came out this is why I'm thinking about it, because they did single leg extensions versus double leg, and then they did single leg press and all kinds of stuff, but it was mainly just for the quads. And what they found was the same thing that every other study like this has found, that there was no difference in hypertrophy, but the only thing the unilateral group showed to be better at was the unilateral 1 rep max. And again, this is just specificity of training. And all that means is strength is very task specific. And so when you're doing something unilateral, you're getting better. Your brain is better at doing the unilateral version. You form those neurological adaptations. And that is what's happening in this case, right? That's why the muscle growth is similar, but the strength, because then when the strength transfers over, the strength on the bilateral is the exact same as the strength. Both groups have the same strength when they're doing bilateral testing, is essentially what's happening. So this is one of those times where the theory and the mechanism is sound-ish, but the outcome just doesn't seem to be there. And we do know that, so when should you use single leg or unilateral exercises if we know that they're likely going to cause the similar hypertrophy to doing bilateral? Well, we can take advantage of the fact that we can take advantage of this mechanism that we might be not splitting up our central motor command as much, and use them later on in the session, right, when we're already a little bit more fatigued, when we have a little bit of central nervous system fatigue that has built up. And when you think about central nervous system fatigue, think of it as just perception of effort, right? When you get towards the end of your workout, you're a lot more tired just in general than you are at the beginning. And there are some things you can do to limit this, but again, in general, you're a lot more tired. So this is where I normally like to program my unilateral exercises towards the end. And that's really the biggest use case I have for them, other than correcting imbalances. So a lot of times you're going to end up with imbalances. You're going to end up having one limb that is stronger than the other. And you're going to start with imbalances as well, because most people, their dominant limb is stronger than their non-dominant, because obviously they use it more. So to correct these imbalances, the way that you will do this is just by hitting the weak side first. And then depending on how severe the imbalance is, if your left tricep, let's say, for example, is way weaker than your right tricep gets 4 reps more than your left one, then in that case, I would just go straight to it, no rest, go from left to right. But if it's not that big of a discrepancy, then I would say hit a unilateral exercise or hit one side and then rest 30 to 90 seconds, kind of just how you're feeling, and then hit your right one. So this was kind of just a general video, just explaining motor unit recruitment overview, single limb versus multi-limb. I'm trying not to use as much scientific jargon in these, but yeah, that's kind of how your brain moves and muscles contract. Anyways, short video. I know I'm at HEB. I didn't go to my house, but that's all I got for y'all today. Peace out. Love you. Have a great one.